Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to welcome attorney, author of Sex Cult Nun, and TEDx speaker Faith Jones. Graduated summa cum laude from Georgetown School of Foreign Services with an honors from UC Berkeley Law School. Previously a corporate attorney with Shadden Arps in Los Angeles and Hong Kong. Represented the founders of Skype Technologies in obtaining a $500 million earnout from eBay, represented clients from different types of businesses, from startups to Fortune 500s, owns a law practice that advises clients on expansion, joint ventures, partnerships, shareholder matters, fundraising, and investment. Has also worked with businesses and government leaders in the Pacific Rim concerning opportunities in Asia. Named a top 40 under 40 M&A deal advisor in 2015, spent much of her early life in East Asia and speaks Mandarin and Chinese, worked as a humanitarian aid worker in Kazakhstan, Japan, and Taiwan, an investor and patent holder of the personal air filter device, a non-mask wearable air filter for polluted areas. So I would like to give a warm welcome to Faith Jones. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Karen. Lovely to be here.
So Faith, I'd like to congratulate you on all your achievements. So can you please share with us how your career started as an attorney and author? So what led you into choosing that career path?
Necessity, perhaps. So actually, as we discuss more of my story in the book Sex Cult Nun and my upbringing and how I grew up in a cult without really receiving formal education and so on, you'll begin to, that picture I think will become more clear. Yes. Of how I made that choice. But fundamentally, when I made the choice to become an attorney, I was actually in college at the time. There wasn't like this lifelong dream to be an attorney. It was really out of necessity because I had experienced as a child and in the group, extreme poverty. I'd experienced at a point when my parents were separated for a little while, where my mother was like, couldn't support us, kids couldn't feed us. I was like 12 years old, begging in parking lots for money to feed my two, baby siblings that were baby and taller at the time. So I think that had a really powerful impact on me. And I never wanted to be in that situation where I was dependent on other people for my livelihood, for my survival. And also at that time, my mother was outside of the group, right? Because this was a religious organization that lived communally and shared everything. And at that time we were outside of the group. We didn't have that support base. We didn't have that protection. And just to see her and recognize she was unable to leave in a way because she couldn't take care of us on her own. Yes. And to recognize that when you are in a situation where things are abusive to you and you can't get out of it because you don't have the economic wherewithal to escape. You don't have economic independence. And I said to myself, I never want to be in that situation. So when I was in college and I was going to Georgetown and I was looking around at the jobs available, and, with the issue we have in the world today of sort of degree inflation. And I realized that I was like, well, when I graduate from college, even though it's a fantastic school, most of the entry-level jobs don't pay a lot. So I was like, well, maybe I need to, I don't want to also be completely dependent on someone else to hire me and pay me. And I thought, well, if I become a lawyer, that's a really useful, practical skill. Yes. And the truth is, growing up as I had done in this cult, we didn't have a concept of what am I going to be when I grow up? We were told that being a missionary, a mother, that was it. That was it for the rest of our lives. Jesus was going to come back. The world was going to end. There was no concept of a career, zero. We weren't even going to school, right? Because there was so little concept of having any kind of career outside. So unlike other kids, I hadn't thought about what do I want to be when I grow up. And so when I left in my early 20s, I was still trying to figure all of that out.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go with something really practical here that will give me some practical knowledge. And it did. It is true. It did. So it was an interesting journey doing it that way.
Yeah, for sure.
And the author part, I don't know that I set out to be an author. It's just that I had things that needed to be expressed. I had stories that needed to be told.
Yeah.
And so that was why I chose to do that, to write actually 2 books. The first book I wrote is called I Own Me. It's really a manifesto or a guide for women reclaiming their property rights in their body and taking back themselves after abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, harassment. And then the next book I wrote, which was published by HarperCollins, is Sex Cult Nun. And that is my memoir and story of growing up in this group and how I was able to set myself free, I guess.
Yes, yeah. And to gain that independence.
Yes, and accomplish what I did. So
that's amazing. So you're very passionate about empowering business owners with a clear and straightforward process using your legal knowledge to build their business with confidence, which is so critical. So can you share with the audience more about this and what makes you so different to others within your industry? What do you feel separates you or makes you different?
So I think it's that same sense of recognizing that I wanted independence to be able to take care of myself, and I want to empower others with that. So oftentimes in the legal industry and in a lot of professions, licensed professions, the goal is not to empower the client. The goal is to make the client dependent on you. This is true in coaching and therapy and lots of other professions like this. Like, if I make you dependent on me, you have to keep coming back every week or whatever. And my goal is not that. My goal is I want to teach you how to do it yourself. I'm going to simplify it for you, give you the processes, empower you to know what you need to know so that you can go and find the right advisors, providers, and really set you free from needing me. If I can show you how to do it and teach you how to do it, you go do it. I got lots of other things to do in my life.
Yeah. You know? So and also just creating non-codependency, I think, is very important.
I create content to teach people how to do that. So the first course I created way back in 2017 was called the No BS Business Structure. And I was like, these are the principles you need to set up your company in America. This is how you set up your LLC. I did a whole contract class for entrepreneurs and taught them all the most important principles of understanding contracts for their business. And here's a sample contract. I was like, here, put it in place. You do it now.
Giving them the practical tools, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah. And for me, the other thing I'm really good at is understanding what is the fundamental core thing needed. Not all this other periphery around the edges, right? Yeah. I get down to the core and the basics and say, this is the simplest way to get to where you need to go.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So I want to obviously talk about leadership from both an entrepreneurial and global perspective and why leadership is such a big part of your core focus. So what do you believe needs to be done better to change the current narrative around leadership from both perspectives? And what do you believe you do better in terms of leadership?
I think one of the core things we need to look at in leadership that gets missed a lot is the core principles.
Yes.
So when I created, if you can see the framework here behind me,
yes,
right? These are the core principles. I call it IPOC, the Immutable Principles of Conduct, right? Yes. This is really our moral compass. And these basic principles, which perhaps we can talk about a little later, very simple, 10 basic principles, really 5, but one of them has 5 subcategories.
Yes.
That is the basis for all of our lives, every relationship, every business relationship, every contract, our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with our partners, with our children, with the world, right? Yeah. Understanding these core basic principles is, I think, where a lot of us, we go wrong. We try to look at, oh, we need to do this and we need to do that and we need to be this way and that way, but we don't first go and say, who do I need to be at my core? What are my core principles of how I'm going to interact in business and in relationships, and then move forward from there, right?
Yeah.
It's really leading by yourself, your own example first, and you have to lead yourself first. And once you really know, this is my moral standard, and I know that if I follow this standard, I'm not going to be abusing other people. I'm not going to be taking advantage of them. I am going to be entering into good, healthy business relationships, both for myself and others. I'm not going to allow other people to take advantage of me.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
That way you are really begin leading by example, and you can share those principles with other people, and your relationships will be better. Your business deals will be better. And I think that's where you have to start. And so many of us, we go to this leadership conference and that leadership conference. We haven't gotten our own principles straight first.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. So you're also deeply passionate, articulate advocate for women's empowerment and business leadership. So can you share with us more about this, and why is this something that has so much significance and importance to you?
It's because of the strengths. I mean, well, first of all, fundamentally, what I was saying about empowering yourself, being able to care for yourself. But I think one of the things that's missing in leadership circles, and this is not something new, is the downplaying of women's strengths versus, what are traditionally men's strengths, and not recognizing how incredibly important women's natural strengths are in the leadership process. And so, for instance, women are incredibly good at understanding the context of things and bringing things into balance. When we look at a situation, we're not just seeing this is what I'm going to do and that's it and we're going here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That is a good male strength, and you need both, but they have to be balanced. And the woman looks at it and she says, okay, but this is going to affect Susie in the accounting department. It's going to affect this person here. It's going to affect that person there. This person is going to, be off, and we only have these resources and we're going to have to distribute them like this, right? Women are very good in planning, in understanding, in seeing the kind of more the full picture and all the context and bringing all that into the conversation. And if that's ignored, then you're creating decisions that are ultimately not beneficial for the company or for the people involved.
Exactly. So with that, what have been some of your biggest lessons and learnings within your career? And I'm sure there's been multiple, but is there something that particularly stands out for you?
I would say that do the best you can at whatever is in front of you right at that moment, and you have no idea how far you can go.
Yeah.
If you like that paper you got to write in college, that deal, whatever it is, strive for excellence in it. And you're not going to hit it every time. It's not going to be perfect. I don't mean that, but really put in the effort and time to make it as good as you can.
Yeah.
And that will get noticed. You will go much farther than you ever expect. I mean, I didn't expect, coming from my background with almost no education, to even be able to compete at a school like Georgetown. Right? I didn't expect that I could get all A's when I was comparing to those type of students, that I could graduate at the top of my class, right? But in each class, I did the best I could.
Yes.
And I put that extra time in. I stayed up late redoing my papers over and over. And you just never know where you're going to go if you do that. So that's one thing I would say. Another is, and this definitely became more relevant as I progressed in my career, stand up for your value.
100%.
You have got to demand your value. You have got to recognize your own value, and you've got to stand up for it. And this is something I still struggle with. I still fight, It's like, oh my God, I am, a certain level of attorney. I'm a partner level attorney. Am I charging what I should be charging?
Yeah.
Am I demanding that value and that respect? And it is harder for women. I have seen this in my career.
Absolutely.
When I was a new associate, I was like, oh, well, I'm a new associate, so, that's fine, But, once you've been in the business almost 15 years and, you recognize men going and talking to another man for advice who isn't an expert instead of talking to you for advice. And you're like, there's a subtle,
it's almost divisive in a way, isn't it?
Well, it's an unconscious bias.
Yeah, true.
And I have become more and more aware of this in my career.
Yes.
And I think that what is necessary, and I counsel women on this, you have got to recognize your value. You've got to go out there and say, this is the result I'm getting you. You can't get this anywhere else, and stand up and demand you get paid in accordance with that, and don't let up. And if someone doesn't want to do it, walk away.
100%.
Don't mess around.
Yeah, very much so. So, Faith, you're not only an international attorney, but an author and TEDx speaker. So I'd like to first talk about your book called Sex Cult Nun. So can you tell us more about this powerfully titled book, and what compelled and motivated you to write the book, and what the book is about for the audience members who don't know? I know that's a lot, but
that is a lot. So this is the book. It's titled Sex Cult Nun. On the cover, you can see there's like a hook with a feminine symbol on it, right?
Yes.
And that was due to one of the practices in this organization called flirty fishing. So I grew up it was an evangelical Christian organization founded by my grandfather and my father and aunts and uncles in the 60s in California, in Huntington Beach.
Yeah.
And it soon spread all over the world. It was a very aggressive missionary organization. And there was a lot of things that people would say were good about this, live clean, healthy lives, and don't do drugs, and don't smoke, and don't, over drink, and eat good food and exercise, and, help others. But because they didn't have this set of kind of core principles, an objective standard of core principles, when my grandfather began to get different revelations about sex, about sexual liberties, that there's only one law is love, and so that the women need to share with all the men, and it even went down to child sexual abuse, because they didn't have this objective standard, it was like whatever he thought he was being revealed to him from God, which I think also was filtered through his own perversions.
Yes, for sure.
That became the doctrine, right? That became the law. And so that was one of the things that made the group become abusive, right? Yes. And also this style of top-down hierarchy, absolute control, obedience, this patriarchal style of governing, control, isolation. It allowed the group to engage in a lot of activities and practices that they could make like good, nice sounding, noble sounding kind of excuses for, but fundamentally they were abusive.
Yeah, 100%.
So when I left the group, it took time for me to understand what had even happened to me. I didn't know what had happened to me for years. And I didn't understand that, like, being coerced into having sex with men I didn't want to, when I was a young person, as a teenager, that was rape, right? And
yes.
I didn't understand those distinctions. And so after I created the framework, right, the IPOC framework, right, these principles, when I really understood that, then I was able to go back and dissect what had happened in the group. And I was able to understand where the violations had occurred and how those violations had occurred, especially when you're talking about a group of people that were very idealistic. It wasn't like they set out to be bad. I mean, there were certainly very bad apples that, and their behavior was allowed within the group. But for the most part, I'd say these people were really trying to, they were sacrificing an enormous amount of themselves. And yet they got so off track. And I was like, how does this happen?
Yeah.
And I recognized that it came from starting with the message, the core, like fundamental message was giving up your property right in yourself, giving up your self-ownership. Because when you give up that self-ownership, you are also turning over your concept of moral responsibility to your leaders. So you're saying, well, I'm not at fault. He told me to do it, right? Even when you're doing something that you know is wrong or that is abusive. So in that sense, I think that was the core of what went wrong there. And the core of what we consider morality is starting from the foundation of, I have a property right in my own body. You can't tell me to go have sex with somebody I don't want to. You can't tell me to do things because that's slavery, right? That's slavery, that's rape. Really seeing something for what it is instead of all of the nice, noble sounding, excuses that they try to wrap it up in when they're trying to convince you to do it. Right. So seeing the principles clearly is like when you're looking, if you wear glasses, right? When you don't have your glasses on, everything's really blurry and fuzzy, right? And then as soon as you put your glasses on, it all comes into clear focus and you can see all the distinctions very clearly. You can see exactly what's going on, right? That's what this like simple framework here is. It's just each of these circles, each of these principles. It's like one of those glasses, lenses you hold up to your eye, and all of a sudden you can see exactly what's happening. And then it frees you to make the choice. Am I going to do this? Am I going to go along with it or not? But you're not blinded by guilt, manipulation, lies, and all of this other things.
Yeah, no, for sure. So obviously when you grew up, because you didn't grow up in a normal environment like most children, so when you finally escaped or emancipated yourself from the situation, what was the deciding factor or the moment for you where you decided to remove yourself or escape or run away from this environment? Because it must have been an absolute nightmare. I mean, I can't even imagine.
Well, in any situation like that, there's always good and bad.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just like everything was terrible. There's a lot of terrible things, but there's always good and bad. And that's why people stay, right? There's a balance, a sense of family, a sense of belonging, a sense of idealism, right? For me, it fundamentally came down at that time. I didn't know, because I'd grown up in the group. That was all I knew. I didn't realize that this was wrong. I didn't understand that about the principles. I really wanted an education.
Yes.
And I had glimpses of it at different points in my life, which I talk about in the book. And it got to a point where for me, my mind was just screaming, because in the group, we were only allowed to read what was written in the group, right? And it's just basically the rehashings of these, religious materials over and over and over again. And I desperately wanted to learn and to expand my horizons and to have that independence. I wanted an education. I wanted to go to college, and I couldn't do that in the group. So that was what ultimately pushed me to leave.
Okay. Wow. So at what point did you decide to write the book? Like, when did you get to a point where you wanted to write the book and share the story? Was there a particular moment, or was it over a period of time?
I mean, I wanted to write the book for years after I had, graduated and become a lawyer. Initially, why I wanted to write the book was to show people who had experienced something similar, had grown up in a group or something similar like it, who weren't given the opportunity to have an education when they were younger, that didn't matter, that they could make something of themselves. Right? That they could, if they chose, they could go to school, they could go to college, they could get an education, they could become something much bigger. Because what we were told in the group, and what did end up happening to quite a few people, because I think they believed this narrative, was that if you leave, you're just going to be a stripper, you're going to be on drugs, you're going to go to jail, you have no future, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be like, no, that's not true. You really can be very successful even with that kind of a background.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that wasn't enough incentive for me to write this book, because I felt like, well, I don't want to just be another story of, grit your teeth, work hard, and you can make it. There's plenty of those. So,
Yes.
I felt like it was missing something really fundamental there.
Mm.
And so when I created the framework, right, and I really understood these core principles, then I said, now this is the time. That is a worthy enough reason to expose myself in this way and to write this book, to demonstrate what happens in a society and in a people when these principles are destroyed, when they are not followed, right? Because it's a very clear example of that in a society. I mean, the group, the family, or the children of God, it completely created its own separate society, right? So we have so many issues in the world today, with all of this different political stuff and everybody infighting and arguing about stuff, but we're not talking about the most core rights of the individual
100%.
and the moral principles of
Yeah.
what we're living by and the laws that we create. And having lived that myself and knowing where it can go to and what it can be like, I think this is one of the biggest topics we need to be talking about. What are our rights and responsibilities? Because this has two sides. If I have a right, I have a responsibility to execute that right in a way that doesn't harm others, that doesn't harm the environment, right? So really getting clear on those principles, I think, is what we need. And so that became the reason for why I did the TEDx talk and I wrote the book, was to show people that journey to understanding, to discovery, show people how that even just knowledge of these principles and getting them in your bones, it gives you conviction to stand up for yourself, to take back control of your life, even if you've been, abused and abandoned and, had all of those things stripped away from you. It gives you that purpose to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know one of your biggest passions is supporting and empowering women, especially after going through what can only be described as the deepest, most violating sex crimes and using religious cults to do so. So many women and children are faced with varying levels of harassment, abuse, rape, assault, and grooming, be it in the workplace, home, or many other environments. The biggest fear for most is the stigma and self-shame that is felt, which is why so many women and children don't speak out. So how, in speaking your own truth and sharing your own story, do you hope to change the narrative? And what are some of the practical steps women and children and anybody else can take to get support and help?
So I very much understand that, because I kept my own story secret for 18 years. I didn't tell anybody I'd even been in the group. I just completely went away from it. I wanted everyone just to see me as this, powerful woman attorney, and not like any sort of stigma of being a victim or abuse or anything like that with it. And when I recognized it was time, right, I also did healing work, which is really important to do. I had been doing my own healing work for years. And so when it was time to tell that, actually, when I told it, when I went public with it, it was on the TEDx stage.
Wow,
so that was a bit of a
very
shock.
courageous. Wow.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
But before that, I had started to tell some of my friends. I mean, these people have been friends with me for many years. That didn't know. So I began to tell some of them and say, hey, this is, this is how I grew up and stuff. I didn't go into details about much of the sexual stuff unless they, looked it up and asked, but just starting to share that. And what I found is when I shared something about my story, almost all of my friends had a similar story. Even though they'd grown up in normal society, they'd been abused as children. They had some uncle or grandfather, somebody who had sexually assaulted them, like so many people did. And I think my sharing my story allowed them the freedom to express their story.
Yeah.
And so, understanding you're not alone. I mean, this is a huge worldwide problem. When you're talking the statistics in America, they say a third of the women in America have been sexually assaulted. I'm sure the number is even higher in certain communities, but like the likelihood that a lot of your friends and people you know have experienced something similar is very, very high. And I don't mean one, I mean a
multiple.
lot of them.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, not that sense of not feeling alone, that you can share it and talk about it. I think be very careful who you share it with initially, because if you get sort of a bad reaction at first, it can make it harder. I think the other thing is, once you understand the framework, and that's why the first book I wrote was I Own Me, right? Declaring I own myself, I own my body. And these are the principles to understand what has happened to you. If something like that has happened to you, a new way to see yourself and your rights and the abuse, and, you know, that you were not responsible. It really allows, I wrote that for women, and I mean, for men who have been abused as well, because it happens a lot to men too, that they can begin to reframe what happened to them and understand clearly what their boundaries are first. Understand what your boundaries are first, start creating those healthy boundaries. That will give you the internal strength and conviction to stand up and to express it for yourself, what happened, right? So I think
when you wrote the book and when you speak about healing, did that help you? Was that part of the healing process for you when you wrote the book as well?
Well, which book? So when I wrote the first book, I think it was because I was really clarifying these principles and these ideas and sharing, you know, the healing processes that I'd used with other people. I'd really done a lot of the healing work prior to writing Sex Cult Nun. And I think that made a big impact on how I was able to tell the story, how I was able to tell it, not with judgment, but with, you know, understanding. And so I think that made a big difference. Many people use writing their book to heal themselves. And I think that can be very hard for the reader, because then the reader is trying to heal for the person writing. Versus having the reader, you know, be able to be there and see what's happening and make their own decisions, their own conclusions as they read the book. So it wasn't that I used writing the book to heal. I'd done the healing work. And that's why I put the exercises in my first book, to show people these are things that really worked for me to help me heal some of these core wounds, and you can use them for yourself. Like I said, DIY, do it yourself. Always trying to give people the stuff, because not everybody can or wants to go to a therapist.
No, and some people just don't have the wherewithal or the funds to do it. So how do you do it on your own? That's
and so saying, okay, this exercise really helped me. Here you go. You can do it for yourself, you know, at least get you started on that journey. But I think writing the book, the Sex Cult Nun, my memoir, that was, oh man, that was a very difficult process.
I'm sure, because you had to relive that whole experience, right?
Yes. But one thing I did find is it gave me a good perspective on stuff. Because I wasn't just looking at stories separately. You know, once you spent all that time, like almost 2 years writing, you've created this trajectory, this arc, and you can see, and I began to see patterns of what like my mother would do or stuff. I'd be like, wow, am I doing that? You know, so, you know, there's these patterns we see, there's these patterns that come. I interviewed my parents for many hours, and, you know, just to see, well, you know, if I was too young to understand what happened, what happened behind that, this thing that I had always known, like my mother left me when I was a baby for 2 months, you know, and then to find out what was the story behind that, you know, like I said, it creates context, and that changes your own personal story and narrative. So in that way, I think it was helpful.
Amazing. Well, yeah, it's so inspiring. So having written the book and given the immense trauma you experienced growing up, you're such an example to so many, and how you can turn your life around, which you mentioned earlier. You graduated summa cum laude from Georgetown School of Foreign Service with honors from UC Berkeley Law School. You have a very impressive resume, and you own your own law practice and continue to achieve so much working with such a diverse portfolio. With your international experience, what would you say have been some of your biggest motivations? And what do you believe you do better than your competitors? And do you think, having worked and dealt with so many diverse industries, this has given you an advantage? I know that's a lot.
That's a compound question. There's a lot of questions in there. As lawyers, we're like, you're not allowed to ask more than one question at a time. But I will try to address that and remember all of them.
Yeah.
I think that I actually grew up overseas. I didn't come to America for the first time until I was 12. So
Okay.
I grew up in a village in China. My parents were American. I was surrounded by people from lots of different nationalities that had joined the group, and we lived communally. And then I came to America for the first time when I was 12, but only for about a year, and went back. And I lived all over the world. I mean, I lived in Japan, Kazakhstan, Russia, China,
Wow.
Thailand, like Hong Kong, Macau. I lived all over. And I actually, when I was in those countries, we would be there for doing missionary work. So, I was there not just as a tourist. We really didn't do any of the tourist stuff. I lived there. So for a year or more, I would live there and learn the language and, learn about the country and the economy and the culture. So I think that very much shaped my ability to see the world from many different perspectives, not like a US centric perspective, but to be able to look at all these different issues from many points of view. And I think that's incredibly helpful in any of my work that I do. The other thing, when you say like, what can I do better, I guess, than my competitors is, well, like I said before, the ability to take something very complex and simplify it into what is really the core here. What's the core issue? And I do that in each field of my work. So this framework, these principles, when I flip that over, that is the underlying basis for all of the moral law, and not just the moral law in America, but all over the world. It is actually all based on a concept: property rights, contracts. What is a violation of the body? Rape, murder, slavery. What is a violation of our creations? Theft, destruction of property. What is a violation of the deal? Things like fraud, blackmail, breach of contract. What is a violation of the effects, which is impact beyond your direct control? This is things like inciting violence or environmental degradation, etc. So I was able to, when I understood the core base principle, I could literally fit all of the law into that simple diagram, all of the moral law. We're not talking about, regulations and traffic violations and stuff like that.
No.
We're talking about crimes, things that we say these are crimes, right?
Yeah.
So when I say that that's kind of my superpower, and I do that in many areas. So the area I've been focused on recently is understanding money, retirement, best structures for things. So I'm a corporate attorney, and so one of my focuses is, how are you structuring yourself? You structuring an LLC, C corps, partnership agreements, understanding the trajectory of the business deals and contracts. But and most attorneys, they're just going to stay in their field, in their lane, and even in their jurisdiction. Like, just, this is my state.
And they won't step out of that.
But because I've been an international attorney, and I've worked in Hong Kong, and I've worked in Los Angeles and New York and many different locations, I step back from that and I say, let me survey the whole picture here. Let me survey all the jurisdictions, and let me ask what would be best for the client from this perspective, not just from one tiny myopic perspective. And so for me, what that's led me to do in my current work is understanding, like, now what I teach people about. So before I was teaching people, okay, this is your LLC, this is your C corp, this is your S corp, this is why you don't do it this way or that way. And then because I'm a constant learner, right? And I'm constantly trying to break things down, learning about the trust structure and how that is fundamentally for most people, it can be the most beneficial structure to operate your life from, your business from. And most corporate attorneys would never see it that way. They would just say, oh, that's the field of trust and estates, and when you're going to die.
Yeah.
Not recognizing that there are actually structures out there, and some of the largest industries were held in trust. The railroad industry, the steel industry, the biggest industries in the world at the time were held in trust. It is one of the most fundamental structures to understand, and it can really be transformative. So it's that kind of, not just sitting there and saying, this is what everybody says.
Yeah, exactly.
Challenging, questioning, and looking for what's really going to be the best and the most effective.
Yes.
And going for that, even if that's not what everyone else is doing, because everyone else is just like, they just drink the Kool-Aid and they sit there and say, okay,
Yeah, you see it at conferences all the time.
Right. And this is true of people, professionals in any field. Are they really looking for what's the best and what's the cutting edge, or are they just tootling along and saying, this is how we do it, rubber stamp it?
Yeah, exactly. So you're actually working on something new currently. So can you give us some insight into your new venture, or what it is that you're doing for the audience?
So that was a little sneak peek into it, but understanding how to set yourself up in trust structures, which gives you way more protection, security, an ability to plan, using the right structure. And most of them are not right. I'm going to tell you that, right? 99% are not what you want to use. You really need to have someone who can tell you exactly the right one.
Yes.
And that is, how you can set up your business, your life. You can enormously reduce your taxes doing that. You can protect your assets much better. So and the other thing I was working on, and we finally launching it now, and this is trust structure is a fundamental part of this, is I realized, a few years ago, I was like, I'm an attorney, I make a good income, but if I don't learn how to invest and make money for me, then 100%. I will be stuck in this rat race forever.
Yeah.
And guess what? I want to take time off. I want to focus on what is more my philanthropic mission, which is this side of, helping empower people and women and children and I own me. But I need to know how to make my money make money. And that was something that I had not grown up with. That was not what my parents did. They basically had no money and still. So it was something that I had some internal mental blocks against. So I began that journey for myself, and I created a whole course for people to understand what are these fundamental, like I said, bring it down to the fundamentals, what is the best structure that's going to help you achieve your goals the fastest. And it's not the traditional structures like the LLC or the 401k. What kind of investments? What do you look for in investing? How do you look at structuring investing? Are there special vehicles you can use to invest from that actually give you tax-free returns? So that's what I've broken down in this course. And
that's amazing, because it's something that so many people just need, because everybody's just stuck in this thing where they're living hand to mouth and can barely make ends meet in the current situation as well. So that's amazing.
And even a lot of my clients who are entrepreneurs, and they may do very well. They make millions in a year, but what do they have left at the end of the year?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? They're spending it all. They don't understand how to set it up in a structure and invest it in, and I realized, what I can save people by deferring their taxes and investing can just transform their life. I can get them to a place they could retire within 7-8 years, So when I began to realize how powerful this is,
100%.
then I said, this is something I have to share, because this is part of my We Rise Free mission, right? When I say we rise free, do no harm, you can see the Phoenix logo in the background there. That is about, you have to set up your core foundation right. And this is the core principles, both in your relationships, right? Which is the IPOC framework, where we talk about these are the core principles of how to set yourself up, create healthy relationships, boundaries, business deals. And then you need to really understand the structure. What is the correct structure? And I literally say, this is why this structure works and this one doesn't. And then understanding what's investing. What is my goal with investing? Most people don't even know that. They haven't gotten their goal active.
No, they don't.
They don't even know what it is, right? What's your win with money? They're like, what?
They don't even know where to invest their money, let alone anything else. So
right. So then like you gotta understand how to grow your money, what those principles are. And then the final like core foundation stone, if you're getting all of these core foundations right, is health. Right.
Yes.
And that's something I've been very passionate about and a student of for many, many years as well. So when you really get those 4 cornerstones in place, boy, your life can just take off.
Yeah.
And what I try to do is I try to break it down to what are the hacks? What's the simplest you need in each of those areas? It's not a big headache. It's not a ton of stuff to learn. Just follow these simple principles and that will help you to take off, and you create a solid foundation for your life. And then that's how you can put yourself in a true position of independence, emotional, mental, spiritual freedom and independence without violating the rights of others. Yes. And also economic independence. Because if you don't have economic independence, then you're going to be in situations where other people feel like they can abuse you because you're stuck.
Yes, exactly. It's very true. You have to come from a position of strength. Be the
architect of your life, be the architect, like design it on purpose. Understand this is the best way to build this piece of it, and then do that. And you'll build a really strong foundation.
That's amazing. So that leads me to the last 2 questions. So what are the 3 key pieces of advice you would give to entrepreneurs or others looking to pursue a career in law? And what legacy would you like to leave, or how would you like to be remembered? Because some people don't like the word legacy.
I don't mind it. First of all, law is a field a lot of people default to when they shouldn't.
Okay.
It's a difficult field to be in because you are constantly focused on the negative. And this is one of the things I don't like about law. It's not great if you want to be an entrepreneur, because it just teaches you to look for all of the possible ways and the risk and the liability and the way everything can fail.
Yes.
Okay. And I think a lot of people go into it not understanding what it's going to be like. So first of all, if you think you want to be a lawyer, go work at a law firm. Go be a legal intern, go be a paralegal, go work and see what is the day-to-day grind like. If you like it, if you love it, if you like that nitty-gritty, getting into details, and you like writing, you like drafting stuff, right? Then you're like, okay, I've tried it. I really know, because law is an expensive pursuit. And if you go to law school and you say, I hate being a lawyer, right? I don't want to do this. You've wasted quite a bit, and now you're being a barista at Starbucks trying to figure out what you want to do. So start first. And this is true for anything, if there's a field you think you want to go into that's going to take a lot of education, go intern there first. Take that time to do it. And if you do decide on law, then work really hard to try to get into the best school that you can, the best tier school. It does matter, especially when you're getting your first job out of school. And then you also want to try to go work at the best reputation place that you can go. Even if it's known as a sweatshop, right? So I went to work for Skadden. I got offers from a lot of different law firms when I graduated, and Skadden had a reputation for working its associates very, very hard, but I also knew I had a reputation for excellence and for being the best. Okay. So I wasn't like, oh, my life work balance. I was just like, no, I'm going to go to the best place, because if I can always move down from there, right? It's hard to move up again. So think about that. And even if it's like, well, I'm going to have to work a lot harder these first years, it's going to be a much steeper learning curve. You want that. That's what you want, because then you get the training you need to, if you move on to anything else you want to do in your life. So that's what I would say for law in particular. What legacy do I want to leave? I think, honestly, I think the most important legacy is this framework that I've created. I mean, simplifying all the principles for, morality for our life.
Yeah.
I think that if we begin to live like that, if we begin to live according to those principles, we just won't have all of the issues that we have in the world today. I mean, it's not like we don't know them. It's not like they're not baked into our laws in some way or another, but because we're not clear on exactly what they are, because it's been so muddied and confused, we allow all kinds of violations of them in our lives. So really getting clarity on these principles of self-ownership, property rights, morality, the principles of contract, no undue pressure, no manipulation, clarity in terms. If we really lived according to that, our life, our society would be completely different. So I think that's what I would like to be remembered by, is revealing that. I mean, I didn't create them.
Yes.
They've always existed.
It's been there.
But,
but you've reframed it.
Reframe them in a way that is so simple, you could teach it to your kid. And you could literally teach them, this is how you understand what a moral standard is. And it's consistent with the 10 Commandments. It's consistent with, religious principles of, not harming others. So but it's not based in that. So therefore people from all religions can embrace it, right? Because this is the basic principles of us as humans. So that, I think, is what I would like to be remembered for. And I hope that we can share and spread and learn and teach our kids and begin to create and demand that our leaders live by that and treat us with that respect. Our bosses, create that and build that into our laws. Yeah,
exactly. And also, I think, looking at the current global situation we have now, there's such a lack of that and such a lack of leadership, and it's all just greed and power. And so I think that needs to be stripped down. Yeah.
It's a lack of principles. All of our debates are in the law, we call it, or in logic and debate, we call it an ad hominem attack. It's an attack against the person as a human. I don't like their hair. I don't like who they dress, their age, their color, their rate, whatever it is, right? You're attacking the human. You're not attacking the principle. You're not attacking the policy, right?
Yes.
So, and that's what we see everywhere. It's like, I'm a Democrat, therefore everything the Democrats do is great. I'm a Republican, therefore we hate all Democrats, and everything, the Republican Party does is perfect and fine. When both of their leaders are violating laws, violating things constantly, they're excusing themselves on one side, on their own side, and they're attacking the other side. I'm like, how come we don't have a standard that says these are the principles everyone should live up to? I don't care what you're going to paint yourself.
Exactly.
These are the policies that are good for the world. I don't care whose camp they came out of.
Yes. I mean,
those focus on the principles.
They're just catalysts for division anyway. So, and I think if people understand that.
You can't make money without war.
Yeah, true.
You can't make money without debt and without war. So when I say this is fundamentally what I've created here, is really about how do you reduce, control, manage debt and cost, right? How do you, when you get that under control, and that includes the costs and the debt and the taxes you have to pay. If you keep more of that money and you defer those taxes and you invest that money instead and you grow it, well, you're going to be in a completely different position than if you're just out of pocket constantly.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Faith, for joining us today. And if people would like to connect with you, what are the best platforms to do so? And if people would like to get hold of the book, where can they access or?
The book you can buy Barnes & Noble, Amazon. I mean, it's listed on all the platforms. So please do go buy it and read it, because I think it deals with some really important issues of our society today. And I've heard it's a very entertaining read. So difficult in places, I will warn you, but ultimately uplifting. And to get in touch with me, feel free. I mean, you can just reach out to me. You can email me. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I am Faith Jones, my Instagram handle. And you can also email me. I'm actually working right now on putting up my new website. It's not up yet. It's going to be werisefree.com. But my current website is up. It's faithjones.com. So there's a contact email there if you want to reach out to me. So there's plenty of ways.
Well, thank you so much. And hopefully we can have you back in the future to see where you are in your journey.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you for doing this. Thank you for sharing and bringing great content to the world and sharing things that are going to help other people.
Thanks so much.